Sister cities are all about meeting people in other places to better understand the world around us. The dream is to find peace in that understanding. Seattle embraces that vision with 21 sister cities all around the world.
In northwest France, along the Loire River and just 2 hours outside Paris by train, lies Seattle's sister city, Nantes. With a population of about 500,000, Nantes is a fascinating blend of old and new, inspiration and aspiration, and very much in the midst of a significant transformation. Nantes has been Seattle's sister city since 1980, and the Nantais consider Seattle not just their sister, but their twin city, or ville jumelée. What few people realize, however, is this sibling relationship nearly did not happen.
The issue in Nantes was they were concerned that the communist delegates that were on their city council would not want to twin with an American city. This is back in 1980, so we were still, into the Cold War and so forth.
Former King County Executive Randy Revelle was on the Seattle City Council when he joined a committee to identify a French sister city for Seattle.
Well, it really began with Howard Nostrand, who was a professor of Romance languages at the University of Washington. In France, there are about 8 regional capitals, including Nantes, including a city called Nancy in eastern France. And I had studied in Nancy, so I thought Nancy would be a good idea. Others had studied in Nantes, and they thought Nantes would be a good idea. Some of them were worried that because I was a city councilman, I would insist that we go to Nancy, but I didn't. I said, let's look at it on the basis of how the cities would best partner. And Nantes had more things in common with Seattle than Nancy did.
In Nantes, former Deputy Mayor Patrick Maréchal recalls that first meeting.
In 1980, Randy Revelle from Seattle came here in Nantes, and we met and we decided with 3 or 4 other members of the town council to have a training with Seattle.
Like Seattle, Nantes agreed that geographic and economic similarities between the two cities made the pairing a logical one.
We are a port, a harbor, important here in Nantes, and we are interested by sailing and by the sea, generally speaking, with fish and so on. So we are more similar than other cities in the United States.
A deal was sealed, and both cities have active sister city associations that promote cultural and educational ties.
Because of our links, historical links with Seattle, that's why people want to go. Well, they've got the feeling of going to the States, but also going to meet friends, going to meet family.
Since June 2007, traveling between Nantes and Seattle has become even easier since Air France added a direct flight between Seattle and Paris. From Paris, Nantes is just another 30-minute connection. The 1980s were a tumultuous period for Nantes, and soon after the sister city relationship was established, disaster struck.
Oui, il y a 20 ans, il y a eu la fermeture de l'industrie navale, de la construction navale.
20 years ago, the shipyards closed down on the Ile de Nantes. The Port of Nantes was an important employer, and of course, there were a lot of subcontractors and industrial sites that supported the shipyards. So once the port left, many companies shut down. Others moved to Saint-Nazaire.
L'activité industrielle ont cessé et l'activité portuaire s'est déplacée vers Laval.
The heart of the activity on the island disappeared. This created disaster.
S'est trouvé à l'état de friche.
Nantes port was located on the Ile de Nantes, an island along the Loire River across from the historical heart of the city. Faced with increasing pressure from global competition, the need for cheaper ships and quicker access to the Atlantic Ocean became paramount. Not lost on both counts, and its port and shipbuilding industry moved to Saint-Nazaire. With the pullout of these key industries, Nantes faced an economic crisis, and the Nantais suffered a crisis of confidence.
C'était une question de confiance, parce que pendant longtemps, les gens n'y croyaient pas.
Thury says that for a long time, local residents did not believe the city would be able to recover from its economic depression. He's gratified to see attitudes are now changing, and his goal is to convert the former wasteland into a new metropolitan area the size of Green Lake in Seattle.
Depuis 2002, nous avons suscité à peu près 300 000 mètres carrés.
Since 2002, we have rehabilitated about 74 acres of land, and over the next 20 years, our goal is to rehabilitate about 250 acres. We're moving fast. There are a lot of projects. We currently have more than 40 projects under construction, including office buildings, housing, tourist and cultural attractions, and so on. So the process is very dynamic.
Donc, cette opération, ce projet, a une vraie dynamique.
One major tourist draw is a fantastical exhibit called The Machines of the Island of Nantes. The centerpiece is a giant hydraulic elephant that weighs 40 tons and can carry up to 30 passengers. François de la Rosière is the designer who has converted this abandoned industrial warehouse into a workshop for his imagination.
We want to create a different city within the city by installing some unique constructions like the elephant. Our goal is to add a magical touch to Nantes to deliver something extraordinary that will bring life to the island.
Et que la ville soit vivante.
De la Rosière says his vision is to use these moving machines in an experimental and evolving way. Another major cultural project that has energized the Nantais is the nightclub district on the west side of the island. Trendy restaurants have replaced bananas, yes, bananas, in a former warehouse that had historically been used to ripen the fruit. Beyond entertainment, the city of Nantes is also trying to lure new business sectors here. Another former warehouse has been converted into BioWest, a biotech hub. BioFortis is a small business that does clinical studies for the lucrative health food market, and it's starting to gain international partners.
Mais ce laboratoire travaille également pour l'industrie pharmaceutique.
We also work with foreign pharmaceutical companies that send us samples for testing. We have expertise in metabolism and blood analysis, and we work as a central lab for clinical studies for the pharmaceutical industry.
Donc nous sommes ce qu'on appelle un central lab.
So we do biological analysis and already have connections with foreign laboratories, especially American ones.
Étrangers, en particulier américains.
Nantes' longtime mayor Jean-Marc Ayrault embodies the city's pragmatic can-do spirit, and his popular socialist policies continue the legacy of his predecessors.
Oui, c'est pour les gens, pour à la fois les entreprises, mais aussi pour le développement économique, la production de...
Yes, it's for the people. As a socialist mayor, it's important to develop the economy and create more jobs and wealth.
Faire en sorte que les jeunes qui n'ont pas de formation...
Quality of life is also essential. We need to educate the young and create training programs in the job market. Poor families have to have decent housing programs. The middle class has to be served as well.
De la ville, qui est au cœur même de mon projet.
Therefore, socialist policies have been put in place here to promote diversity and quality of life for people in different socioeconomic backgrounds. It's been working well because I've been re-elected 3 times.
Réélu 3 fois maire de Nantes.
Nantes is France's 6th largest city and growing fast. It has a sophisticated public transportation network, including buses that run on natural gas and a Navibus ferry that shuttles passengers across the Loire River. Nantes' tramway system is the city's pride and joy. Built about 20 years ago, it's the oldest and largest tram network in France. At about 25 miles long, the tramway network has grown in tandem with the city and is often used as a model in other European capitals.
Et avec la qualité de la vie. Et la
Quality of life is about being able to get around the city.
La question des déplacements. Et puis demain, ça sera le tram.
We're also developing a combined tram and train system so people can travel up to 62 miles outside Nantes without taking their cars. So the challenge is to have a large-scale European city that's big enough to welcome and host activities and people, but also preserve our quality of life. That's what my sustainable development is all
On
about.
appelle ça le développement durable. C'est ça le développement durable.
Nantes is considered one of Europe's greenest cities and has been nominated by Time magazine as the most pleasant town in Europe. It hires 400 gardeners to maintain all its parks and squares and has committed to keeping 15% of its city green.
It's very good for your mind, for your health also, and it's very important. That's why also a lot of people want to live also in that city.
That commitment does not come cheap. It costs the city nearly $30 million a year to maintain its parks. The Jardin des Plantes is in the heart of the city, like New York's Central Park, and Soinon says its historical significance makes it worth preserving.
This park for us one of the most important because it's the oldest one. The history is great with the decision of Louis XIV to do an acclimated park in Nantes to the new introduction of plants. So here are perhaps the oldest trees of the city.
Another important historical site within Nantes is the castle of the Dukes of Brittany. The original structure was built in the 9th century, but it was destroyed in the 1200s. It was rebuilt in the 15th century and is the oldest building in Nantes.
Je crois que l'originalité du château des Ducs de Bretagne.
I think the originality of this castle is that it's a stronghold from the outside and also a palace, so that makes it very unique among the castles in France.
C'est unique dans l'histoire des châteaux en France. Et autre particularité, c'est sa situation en plein centre-ville.
It's also located right in the middle of the city. Most of the time, castles in Europe are isolated in remote areas, but this is in the city center, making it an urban castle, part of our urban heritage. So it's very deeply linked to the story of the city.
Profondément lié à l'histoire des villes.
For the past 15 years, the castle has been undergoing a complete renovation, and in February 2007, it reopened to the public. Welcoming them at the drawbridge entrance is a statue of Anne of Brittany, a beloved historical figure in Nantes.
Tout d'abord, c'est le château d'Anne de Bretagne. C'est ici qu'elle est née.
Firstly, this is the castle of Anne of Brittany. She was born here. The castle was started by her father, Duke François II, and completed when she was Duchess of Brittany and Queen of France.
La personnalité de cette femme à cette époque qui était difficile.
It was a very difficult position for a woman. Successively, she had to marry two kings, Charles VIII and Louis XII.
Roi de France, d'abord le roi Charles VIII, puis le roi Louis XII.
Today, the castle houses a new high-tech history museum that gives insights into Nantes' heritage, including an exhibit about its colonial past. It has several rooms devoted to Nantes' ties with slavery, including some remarkably well-preserved artifacts. In fact, in the 18th century, Nantes was France's largest port and was one of its richest cities, thanks to its geographic location, shipbuilding tradition, and the pivotal role it played in the slave trade.
Il quittait l'Europe avec des marchandises qui étaient échangées en Afrique contre des esclaves.
The ships left Europe with merchandise and went all the way down to the African coast, where they swapped their goods for slaves. They then sailed all the way to the Americas, in particular the West Indies, where they sold the slaves, and in exchange they bought cotton, sugar, cocoa, indigo, and other merchandise to sell all over Europe.
Amenés en Europe, où elles étaient distribuées dans toute l'Europe.
Deputy Mayor Yvonne Chautat says Nantes' link to slavery has been very controversial, and up till 20 years ago, local residents were still in denial about their dark historical past.
Mais ça a été un combat, la lutte contre l'esclavage. Et les Nantais qui avaient fait fortune, la ville a fait fortune.
Slavery is a long story of struggle, and up until the 20th century, people who lived in Nantes and had gotten wealthy through the slave trade did not feel like talking about it. It was considered taboo. But Nantes probably lost a lot by not confronting its past. More recently, there was finally a political willingness to look history straight in the eyes so that the city's residents would no longer consider its slave trading legacy taboo.
À ne pas être très clair avec son passé, à ne pas regarder son passé en face. Il faut préciser que le passé de Nantes, comme celui de beaucoup de villes et de pays, a été très contrasté.
Now, of course, in France, we've had a lot of revolutions, religious wars, and a lot of turmoil. But probably the most sinister thing in the conscience of the Nantais was the slave trade.
Mais le commerce des esclaves, c'est ce qu'il y avait de plus sinistre dans la conscience ou l'inconscient nantais.
Today, Chautat's law office is housed in a building that belonged to a slave trader. The canal has been replaced by a street and sidewalk, but nearby you can still find 18th century buildings trimmed with ironwork and decorated with figureheads that were built during Nantes' wealthiest era. Every fall, jazz permeates the air during the Rendezvous de l'Erd, an outdoor jazz festival along the Loire River. Jazz has a special significance in Nantes because it was here that jazz was first introduced to the French by American bandleader and Army Lieutenant James Reese Europe.
Jazz et Nantes, c'est une histoire d'amour qui a commencé extraordinairement en 1918. Au moment où le maire, M. Paul Bellamy, a donné une fête franco-américaine.
The love story between jazz and Nantes started back in 1918 when Jim Europe was sent as a soldier to France to cheer up the French troops with his music. He gave a concert at the Nantes Opera House, and at that party he played with his musicians.
James Reese, dit Jim Europe, qui était là, qui venait sur le continent américain pour un petit peu soutenir le moral des troupes françaises. Et ce jour-là,
the Nantais discovered ragtime, a new kind of music they had never heard before, and they fell in love with the music.
Une découverte extraordinaire d'une musique qu'ils ne connaissaient pas. Donc, c'est le début, c'est là que tout démarre.
Jazz curator Jean Neveu feels a personal obligation to remind his fellow Nantais that the arrival of jazz represented an ironic twist of fate for the city.
Je pense que nous, Nantais,
I think that especially as a Nantais, we share some responsibility in the story of African Americans because of the trade of slaves. So it's like making a big loop in history, and it's my contribution to this loop in time. Remember that the last ship that carried slaves to the Americas left Nantes in 1860. And in 1918, 3 generations later, these African American soldiers came to our rescue.
Vis-à-vis de la race noire.
Today, the bells ring again at Place Royale, one of the nicest public squares in Nantes. Looking around, it's hard to believe that back in August 1943, this whole area was 80% destroyed by Allied bombing. Because of Nantes' proximity to the Atlantic coast, it was a strategic military location during the German occupation. However, Nantes was also an important part of the French resistance network, and the Nantais suffered greatly for their involvement. This square is one of the few places in Nantes that was restored to its original condition after the war, and nearby, a historical monument commemorates the 50 local resistance fighters who were executed by German troops during World War II. One intriguing similarity between Seattle and Nantes is its aerospace connection. Seattle is, of course, the original home of the Boeing company, and Nantes is a key manufacturing hub for Airbus, specializing in composite technology for all Airbus aircraft.
Nantes and Saint-Nazaire are responsible for what we call the nose and center fuselage. That means all the forward part of the aircraft from the radome, the top, and the middle of the aircraft. That means the centering box close to the wing.
Here at Airbus in Nantes, the competitive tension with Boeing is palpable.
It is one strong, I would say, focus and target of Airbus is to develop innovation in our aircraft in order to be and to remain the first aircraft builder in the world with our competitors, Boeing.
Airbus anticipates doubling its presence in Nantes by establishing training centers dedicated to research and development of composite technology.
We are going to have more and more partnerships here very close to our company. It will be no more Airbus, but the global extended enterprise.
Airbus assembles its planes in Toulouse, France and Hamburg, Germany, and to move parts from Nantes, it takes to the sky and sea.
Pour envoyer nos tronçons sur Hambourg, nous utilisons le
We ship parts for the double-decker A380 to Hamburg using a big plane called the Beluga, and we have a landing strip close by, where the main assembly line is for the A320. As for the A330, 340, and 380, we ship parts from Nantes to the port in Saint-Nazaire on barges along the Loire River. This is a very environmentally friendly way of carrying parts, and we don't have to add traffic to the roads.
Seattle and Nantes share almost the same latitude, and our similar climates make it conducive for some of the same industries, including wine. Nantes is known for a dry white wine from the Loire Valley called Muscadet, which is popular with the bountiful seafood here. And if you're a fan of fresh seafood, a fun place to visit in Nantes is the Talonz Market, which feels like a cross between Seattle's Pike Place Market and Vancouver's Granville Island Public Market. Talonz is the oldest and biggest market in Nantes and has been around since 1937. It's a wonderful place to pick up a stack of authentic crepes, a pungent assortment of organic cheeses, all sorts of colorful produce, and an interesting variety of locally caught seafood.
You see, that kind of fish is very fresh. We call it limon, that sand fish. You know, so we have many things. Nice, very nice meat, no bones in it. You can fry it, you can steam, pan. It's very nice, very interesting.
Different from American fish?
It's different. Even the fish by himself and the way we prepare it is different.
Charles Zalon has been at the Talonz Market for 15 years and loves interacting with his customers. His easygoing spirit epitomizes what the French call joie de vivre, or the joy of living.
You have to enjoy things. That's the most important. You never know what happens on the next day, so take your pleasure right now.
The big souvenir is a small candy that we call the berlingot.
Nantes is a very walkable city, and guide Sylvain Lenil shows us some highlights of her hometown.
So we are here in the passageway, which is one of the highlights of this 19th century part of the town. It was opened in 1843. It's a shopping arcade of the 19th century. And it really is a testimony of the wealth of the town at that time, which was still a leading port, but also a big industrial town. And a lot of money was invested at that time to have new districts built. And this street, Cobbett Street, which was really the way to go from one point to another, and also a nice place for shopping.
Walkable is a good name.
Walkable, yeah.
They are not the similar name in France.
Ronan Dantek is a deputy mayor in Nantes, and he came to Seattle to get a first-hand look at our green building efforts.
So the water goes through here, then goes right to the swale and goes into the earth.
Exchange programs like this have helped sustain the sister city relationship between Seattle and Nantes over the last 3 decades.
This is a delegation from the Seattle sister city of Nantes, and they are very interested in sustainable features in the house.
It's hot right away.
Celebrations like Bastille Day at the Seattle Center also reinforce the Franco-American connection, even if it means serving up French fries along with more traditional fare.
We have a sizable French community here. There are thousands of French people living in the area. And we also have historical connections in this country with France.
I think the people of Seattle love France and love French culture. And I think I've talked to a lot of Americans today who are just happy to talk to a French person who's been to France.
Every time you make a friend with someone from a different country, you keep this planet of ours a little more secure.
People should be citizens of the world, not nationalistic citizen of one country. It's very good to be proud of your country, to serve your country, but you must realize that it's not the only one in the world.
Nantes Deputy Mayor was on hand to greet visitors at the Seattle-Nantes Sister City Association booth, and after being here a week, he thinks both cities are on the same wavelength.
It's very interesting for me. There are a lot of examples who the two cities make the same things. I think we are the same voluntary to save the planet. I think so. And there are two cities who are not two sister cities, but they are two twin cities. I think so.
Whether Seattle and Nantes are more like twins or just sisters is open to debate, but what seems clear is that both are committed to preserving the family connection. At the end of the day, the strength of any relationship depends on the individuals behind it, and right now, things are looking like they're smooth sailing for Seattle and Nantes.